When U.S. Army Captain Ray Hayes is deployed to Germany during his wife's pregnancy, his world is turned upside down by a car accident and a shattering revelation about his newborn son. Delve into Ray's emotional journey of truth, betrayal, and the quest for forgiveness. Join us as he confronts the complexities of love and duty and discovers what it means to be a father. Don't miss this gripping tale of resilience and redemption. Enjoy watching it. The cold morning air nipped at Ray Hayes' face as he stood outside the military base, waiting for the transport that would take him to the airport. He was dressed in his fatigues, the fabric stiff and new, much like his recent promotion to captain. His duffel bag, packed with both necessities and reminders of home, felt unusually heavy today. Obie, his wife of 3 years, stood beside him. Her hands were wrapped around a warm cup of coffee, steam curling up into the chill. Despite her efforts to smile, Ray could see the worry etched deep in her eyes. She was 7 months pregnant, her belly a gentle swell under her coat, and every part of Ray screamed to stay by her side. But duty called, and it was a call he couldn't ignore. "Promise me you'll call every day, Ray," Obie said, her voice a mix of determination and fear. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached out to adjust the collar of his jacket. "I will, every chance I get," Ray replied, covering her hand with his. His voice was steady, but his heart raced with anxiety. "And you'll keep your phone on you at all times, right? If anything at all, feels off, you call me, or you call Dr. Meller." Obie nodded, taking a deep breath. "I know, Ray. I just wish you didn't have to go. Not now." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Ray pulled her into a hug, feeling the future they dreamed of pressing between them. "I know, love. If there were any way to stay, you know I would." The sound of a vehicle approaching broke their embrace. The military transport, a nondescript black SUV, pulled up to the curb, its engine idling roughly. The driver, a young corporal, stepped out and saluted Ray. "Captain Hayes, we need to get going to make your flight time," the corporal said, his face serious but his eyes sympathetic to the goodbye he was interrupting. Ray picked up his bag and turned to Obie once more. "I love you, and I love our son. I'll be back before you know it, and then I'll be here for both of you. No more leaving." Obie forced a smile, stronger than she felt. "I'll hold you to that, Captain Hayes." She reached up to trace the lines of worry that had begun to form on his forehead. "Come back to us safely." With one last kiss, Ray turned and climbed into the vehicle. He didn't look back, not because he didn't want to, but because he feared if he did, he might not leave at all. As the SUV pulled away, he watched through the tinted windows as Obie stood there, small and strong, her hand resting on the promise of their future. He leaned his head against the cool glass, closing his eyes against the surge of emotions. This deployment, though an honor, was a trial he felt unprepared for, the stakes far greater than any he had faced before. The landscape of Germany was a stark contrast to the warm, familiar terrain of Ray's home in Virginia. As his unit moved swiftly through the dense forests and over rugged terrain, Ray found himself grappling not only with the physical demands of the training, but also with the gnawing concern for Obie and their unborn son back home. The exercise was part of a large-scale NATO deployment, designed to strengthen cooperation and readiness among Allied forces. Each day brought a new set of challenges, from coordinating rapid deployments to navigating complex combat scenarios. The nights were short, spent in temporary camps where the cold seeped into every corner. During a brief respite after a particularly strenuous day, Ray sat with his platoon around a small campfire. The flickering light cast shadows on their tired faces, and conversation flowed more freely in the night's relative calm. "Captain Hayes, you've been quiet tonight. Everything all right back home?" Sergeant Lewin asked, his voice tinged with concern. He was an experienced soldier, the kind whose intuition was sharpened by years of service. Ray stirred the dying embers with a stick, considering how much to share. "It's tough, Lewin. Obie's due soon, and I hate not being there. Every missed call, every delayed message, it gets to me." "You've got a strong woman there, sir. She'll hold the fort till you get back," Lewin reassured him. clapping a supportive hand on Ray's shoulder. "Thanks, Lewin. I just hope she knows how much I wish I could be there," Ray responded, allowing himself a rare moment of vulnerability among his men. The conversation shifted as Private Connors chimed in, eager to lighten the mood. "Think of it this way, Captain. You'll be dodging diapers and late-night feedings for a bit longer," he joked, earning a round of weary laughter from the group. "Yeah, but I'd trade 100 sleepless nights for one quiet evening with them," Ray admitted, his gaze lost in the flames. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Ray threw himself into the training, leading his men with a focus that earned him nods of approval from his superiors. Yet each evening, he would retrieve his satellite phone and attempt to call home, craving the sound of Obie's voice. One afternoon, as the rain poured down, turning the training grounds into a mud-slicked mess, Ray's commanding officer, Major Dennison, called him aside. They stood under the sparse shelter of a large oak, the raindrops pelting the leaves above them. "Captain Hayes, your performance has been exemplary, but I've noticed you're not yourself. If there's anything you need, any support we can offer, you just have to say the word," Major Dennison said, his stern face softened by genuine concern. Ray hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, sir. It's just hard being away at a time like this. My wife, she's—" "Say no more, Hayes. I have 2 kids of my own. Missed the birth of my first being deployed. Never easy, but you're doing important work here," the major interjected, clapping Ray on the back. "Keep your focus, and we'll get you home as soon as we can." The promise was a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. Ray returned to his duties with a renewed sense of purpose, driven by the thought of returning to Obie's side to step into the role he yearned for most, that of a father. The day had been long and taxing, marked by relentless drills and exercises under the gray, overcast German sky. The chill of early evening was setting in as Ray and his unit prepared for the drive back to base. Bundled in their gear, the men talked quietly among themselves, their voices a mix of fatigue and relief that the day's activities were over. Ray climbed into the passenger seat of the military jeep, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of calling Obie. He fumbled with his phone, hoping for a signal, when Private Jensen, the driver, started the engine. "Sir, you might want to buckle up. The roads are slick and it's getting foggy out here," Jensen said, his hand steady on the wheel. "Good call, Jensen. Safety first, right?" Ray responded, securing his seatbelt and settling in for the ride. He glanced at Jensen, appreciating the young private's attentiveness. As they drove, the winding roads bordered by dense forests seemed to grow more treacherous, shrouded in mist and the encroaching darkness of the evening. The headlights of the jeep cut through the fog, casting eerie shadows that danced along the roadside. "Never get used to how quickly it gets dark here," Jensen commented, his eyes focused on the road. "Yeah, it's different from back home. Keep your eyes peeled, wouldn't want to hit—" Ray's words were abruptly cut off by the sudden appearance of a deer in the headlights. The animal stood frozen, its eyes wide with fear. "Hold on!" Jensen shouted as he swerved sharply to avoid the deer. The jeep's tires lost traction on the wet pavement, skidding uncontrollably. Ray braced himself, his heart pounding, as the world outside spun wildly. The jeep collided with a roadside barrier, the impact jarring Ray violently in his seat. The sound of crunching metal and shattering glass filled his ears. Pain flared through his body as his head slammed against the window, and then darkness enveloped him. When Ray awoke, the world was blurry and confusing. He was lying in a hospital bed, his body aching in places he hadn't known could hurt. A steady beeping from a nearby machine played rhythmically, oddly comforting amidst the haze of his thoughts. "Captain Hayes, you're awake. Try not to move too much. You've sustained quite a few injuries," a voice said from beside him. Turning his head with effort, Ray saw a nurse adjusting some equipment. Her uniform was crisp, her expression professional yet kind. "What happened? The others, how are they?" Ray managed to ask, his voice rough and unfamiliar to his own ears. "You were in a car accident. Private Jensen is in the next room. He's stable, like you. You both are lucky. You have a concussion, a broken arm, and a few ribs to match. Your recovery is going to take some time," the nurse explained, checking his IV line. Ray's mind raced as he processed the information. My wife, I need to call my wife. She's expecting. We've informed your emergency contacts, Captain. Your wife knows you're here and safe, the nurse reassured him gently. Relief washed over Ray, mingled with frustration and helplessness. He was stuck here, injured, while Obie was miles away and possibly in need. He closed his eyes, battling the wave of emotions, and focused on the one thing that mattered now, getting better and getting back to Obie. As sleep began to reclaim him, his last conscious thought was a fervent hope that Obie and their baby were safe. Ray's recovery was slow and arduous. Days merged into nights with little distinction as he lay in the hospital bed, grappling with the pain and the heavy medications that dulled it. The solitude of the hospital room gave him too much time to think, to worry about Obie and their baby. His heart ached with the need to be with them, to assure himself they were all right. As the days passed, Ray grew stronger, his mind clearer. He was moved to a less intensive care ward, a sign of improvement that allowed him more freedom to use his phone. He scrolled through old messages from Obie, stopping at the last one she sent before his accident. A picture of her, smiling weakly, cradling her belly. It was dated ominously, the day before the accident. Ray, you need to focus on getting better, insisted Nurse Hoffman during one of her regular check-ins. She was a stern yet empathetic presence in Ray's recovery. I'm trying, but I need to hear from her. I've tried calling, messaging. There's been no reply for days. It's not like her, Ray replied, frustration lining his voice. Perhaps she's busy, or maybe there's an issue with her phone. Try to stay positive, Nurse Hoffman suggested, adjusting his IV. Ray nodded, though the seed of worry grew larger. What if something happened? What if she needs me? It was late one evening, as Ray lay flipping through a magazine without really reading it, that his phone finally buzzed. A message from Obie, but not what he expected. No words, just a picture, and not of her. It was a digital scan of a document, a birth certificate. Ray squinted at the screen, his heart pounding as he zoomed in on the details. Matthew Hayes, born alive on the date of Obie's last message. The room spun around him, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. This couldn't be right. They had lost their son, hadn't they? Obie had told him over the phone, sobbing. Everything all right, Captain Hayes? Nurse Hoffman asked, walking in to find Ray pale and shaking. This must be some mistake, Ray stammered, handing her the phone. It says my son was born alive. That day. Obie told me. We lost him. Nurse Hoffman read the document, her expression turning grave. You need to talk to your wife, Captain. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. Ray nodded, barely able to compose himself. He waited for Nurse Hoffman to leave before dialing Obie's number, his hands trembling. Obie answered on the third ring, her voice tired and strained. Ray? Is everything okay? Obie, I received the birth certificate. It says Matthew was born alive. Why? You told me he was gone. Ray's voice broke, a mix of anger and desperation. There was silence on the other end, heavy and suffocating. Then, a deep sigh. Ray, it's complicated. I was alone, scared, and overwhelmed. Please, can we discuss this when you come home? How can I discuss this calmly, Obie? You lied to me. Our son, is he alive? Where is he? Ray pushed for answers, his voice rising. He was given up for adoption. I couldn't handle it alone, Ray. I thought I was doing the best for him, Obie confessed, her voice cracking under the weight of her words. The revelation shattered Ray. The room around him felt like it was collapsing. His son, alive and given away without his consent or knowledge. His mind raced with unanswered questions, his heart torn between relief that Matthew was alive and betrayal by the one person he trusted most. We'll talk when I get back. We have a lot to sort out, Ray said finally, his voice cold and distant. He ended the call, a deep sense of betrayal settling in his chest as he looked out of the hospital window into the night, feeling more alone than ever. The return home was bittersweet for Ray. The scent of familiarity was overshadowed by the cloud of secrets and lies that had surfaced. As he rolled his suitcase through the front door, the house seemed smaller somehow, its walls constricting around him. Obie was there to greet him, looking frail and anxious. She reached out for a hug, but Ray was hesitant, his heart still bristling with betrayal. "Ray, please, we need to talk," Obie implored, her voice trembling. Ray set his bag down with a sigh, the sound heavy in the silence that followed. "Yes, we do. Start from the beginning, Obie. Why?" They moved to the living room, where Obie began to unfold the story. Her face was pale, eyes red, as if she had spent countless nights crying. "When you left, I felt abandoned," she started, her voice a whisper. "The pregnancy became complicated shortly after, and the doctors, they weren't sure if our baby would make it." Ray's expression hardened. "But he did make it, Obie. Matthew was born alive. Why did you tell me he was gone?" Obie swallowed hard, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I was scared, Ray. Alone and scared. When he was born, they told me he was in critical condition. I thought I was going to lose him, and then thinking about raising him alone if you didn't come back. It was too much." "So you decided to give him up?" Ray's voice rose, a mix of anger and disbelief. "I thought I was doing what was best for him. I couldn't be the mother he needed, not alone." Obie's voice broke as she met Ray's gaze. "I'm so sorry, Ray. I thought I would lose you too, and I couldn't. I just couldn't handle everything." Ray paced back and forth, each step a pound of his heart. "Where is he now? Who has him?" "He's with a family who couldn't have children. They're good people, Ray. I made sure of that." Obie reached into her purse, pulling out a folder filled with papers. "Here, I have all the information. Photos of them, letters. I've kept in touch." Ray stopped pacing, looking at the folder as if it were a lifeline. He took it slowly, his hands trembling. "You've been in touch with them? All this time?" "Yes. It was the only way I could cope, knowing he was happy and loved." Obie wiped away tears that spilled over her cheeks. Ray sat down heavily on the couch, the folder on his lap. He opened it, his eyes scanning the documents, photos of a smiling couple with a little boy who had his eyes. "This is him?" he asked, voice barely audible. "Yes, that's Matthew. He's beautiful, Ray. He's happy," Obie responded, her voice a mixture of pride and pain. Ray looked up at her, a storm of emotions raging within. "I need to meet him, Obie. I need to see my son." Obie nodded, understanding. "I know, and you should. I'll arrange it. Whatever you need, Ray, I'll do it. I owe you that much." The room was thick with the weight of their fractured life, pieces of their shared dreams scattered around like the photos in Ray's hands. As he flipped through more pictures, his eyes tracing the lines of his son's face, a deep, resolute part of him knew that this was only the beginning of a long, complex journey towards healing and possibly forgiveness. The days following the revelation were tumultuous for Ray. He moved out of the home he shared with Obie, needing space to process the deception and to determine the future of their relationship. His new apartment was sparse, the walls bare, and the rooms echoing with the solitude that he had chosen as his temporary refuge. Ray spent hours sitting by the window, looking out at the city but seeing nothing, his mind endlessly replaying the conversations with Obie, the look on her face as she explained her decisions. He felt betrayed yet sympathetic, angry yet sad, emotions tangled in a complex web. During one particularly difficult evening, Ray's phone rang, breaking the silence. It was his sister, Claire, who had been his confidant through everything. "Hey, Ray, how are you holding up?" Claire's voice was soft, filled with concern. Ray sighed deeply, a sound filled with exhaustion. "I don't even know how to answer that, Claire. Every day feels like I'm walking through a fog. I can't even imagine what you're going through, but you're not alone, okay? We're all here for you," Claire reassured him. Ray chuckled humorlessly. I know, and I appreciate it. It's just seeing those pictures of Matthew, knowing he's out there and not with me, it's tearing me apart. Have you thought about what you're going to do? About Obie? About Matthew? Claire asked gently. I've been thinking about nothing else, Ray replied. I want to meet him, Claire. My son. I need to see him, to know him. As for Obie, he paused, unsure. The trust is broken, Claire. I don't know if we can ever get that back. She made decisions that she had no right to make alone, and now we're both living with the consequences, Ray added, his voice tinged with bitterness. Take it one step at a time, Ray. Meeting Matthew is a good start. As for Obie, maybe start with some space and see where things go from there. You don't have to decide everything right now, Claire advised. You're right. I guess I just hoped that by now I'd have more answers instead of more questions, Ray said, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. Answers will come, Ray. Just give it time. And remember, I'm always here if you need to talk, Claire said warmly. Thanks, Claire, I really mean it, Ray replied, feeling a bit lighter. After hanging up, Ray walked over to the window, his gaze now focused. He was determined to meet his son, to bridge the gap that Obie's actions had created. He picked up his phone again, this time dialing the number of the adoption agency Obie had given him. Hello, this is Ray Hayes. I recently found out about my son who was adopted through your agency. I'd like to arrange a meeting, he said when the call was answered, his voice steady but filled with 1,000 unspoken emotions. The conversation that followed was a blur of formalities and confirmations, but by the end, Ray had the beginnings of a plan to meet Matthew. It was a small victory, but it was something, a step towards understanding and healing, and perhaps, in time, forgiveness. Ray's new apartment felt colder, emptier than he had expected. The walls were devoid of character, the spaces filled only with the essentials, a stark contrast to the warm, lively home he had shared with Obie. Here, in this solitude, Ray confronted his thoughts and feelings, unpacking them as he unpacked his few belongings. As he set a photo of Matthew on a small shelf, the weight of his new reality hit him again. He was a father, yet he had missed the beginning of his son's life. This thought often kept him awake at night, staring at the ceiling as he grappled with resentment and longing. One such evening, Ray's phone rang, breaking his reverie. It was his best friend, Mike, who had been trying to get him out of the apartment more often. Hey man, you home? Mike's voice was buoyant, a stark contrast to Ray's somber mood. Yeah, just settling in for another exciting night with my thoughts, Ray responded dryly. Come on, Ray, it's been weeks. Let's grab a drink. You need to get out of that cave, Mike insisted. Ray hesitated, then sighed. All right, Mike, maybe you're right. Give me half an hour. Great, I'll pick you up. And Ray, it's good to hear you're finally ready to step outside for a bit, Mike said, relief evident in his voice. True to his word, Mike arrived and they headed to a quiet local bar. The hum of low conversation and soft music was a welcome change from the silence of Ray's apartment. Sitting across from Mike, Ray fiddled with his glass, the ice clinking softly. I've been thinking a lot, Mike, about everything. Meeting Matthew, fixing, or not fixing things with Obie. It's overwhelming. Mike nodded, his expression serious. It sounds like it, but you're handling it better than most would. I don't feel like I am. Every decision feels monumental. Meeting my son for the first time? What do I even say? Hi, I'm your dad. Sorry I missed the first few years of your life? Ray's attempt at humor fell flat, his tone more bitter than amused. It's going to be tough, sure, but just be honest. You were kept in the dark, Ray. You're doing the best you can with the cards you've been dealt, Mike said, placing a reassuring hand on Ray's shoulder. I hope you're right. And after that, do I try to rebuild my life with Obie? Can I even trust her again? She decided our son's fate without me, Mike. How do you come back from that? Ray's voice was low, strained by the weight of his uncertainty. There's no easy answer, Ray. Maybe start with what you feel is right for Matthew. The rest will follow in time, whatever direction that might be. Mike suggested thoughtfully. Ray nodded slowly, taking in the advice. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as the night wore on, but the depth of his friend's words stayed with him. Returning home later, Ray felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps Mike was right. Maybe focusing on building a relationship with Matthew was the right place to start. Back in his apartment, Ray pulled out the folder with the information about Matthew's adoptive parents. He studied their faces, their smiles. They looked happy, caring. It was comforting yet painful to see. He drafted an email to them, introducing himself and expressing his desire to meet his son. As he hit send, Ray felt a mix of fear and anticipation. Each step was a move toward an uncertain future, but now, at least, he was no longer standing still. The days leading up to Ray's first meeting with Matthew were filled with a turbulent mix of anxiety and excitement. He had exchanged several emails with Matthew's adoptive parents, Tom and Melissa, who were supportive and understanding. They arranged to meet at a local park, a neutral place where Matthew could feel at ease in familiar surroundings. As Ray approached the designated meeting spot, his heart pounded in his chest. Tom, Melissa, and a little boy with bright eyes and a cautious smile were already there. Matthew was playing on the swings, watched closely by Melissa. "Ray?" Tom extended his hand as Ray walked up. "I'm Tom, and that's Melissa, and of course, Matthew." "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," Ray said, shaking Tom's hand firmly. "We think it's important for Matthew to know you," Melissa added, her tone warm yet careful. Ray nodded, his gaze drifting to Matthew, who was now looking at him curiously. "Hi, Matthew," Ray called out softly, not wanting to overwhelm him. Matthew hesitated, then responded with a small wave. "Hi." Ray spent the afternoon observing Matthew, talking to him occasionally, and learning about his interests through conversations with Tom and Melissa. They spoke about Matthew's favorite books and his love for animals, particularly dogs. At one point, Ray sat down beside Matthew on a bench. "Do you like superheroes?" Ray asked, trying to find common ground with his son. Matthew's face lit up. "Yes! Spider-Man is my favorite!" "That's cool. Spider-Man is my favorite too," Ray smiled, feeling a flicker of connection through their shared interest. As the afternoon waned, Ray and Matthew started to bond over a game of catch, laughter filling the air. It was during these precious moments that Ray felt a glimmer of hope about building a future relationship with his son. Before they parted, Ray knelt down to Matthew's level. "I had a great time today, Matthew. I hope we can do it again soon. Would you like that?" Matthew nodded, a shy smile creeping onto his face. "Yes, I'd like that." Ray stood up and looked towards Tom and Melissa, who both smiled encouragingly. "Thank you both for this. It means everything to me," he said sincerely. "We believe it's the right thing," Tom replied, placing a reassuring hand on Ray's shoulder. "We'll take it slow, one step at a time." Driving home, Ray reflected on the day. The journey ahead would undoubtedly be complex and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose and direction. The next steps were unclear, and the situation with Obie remained unresolved, but Ray felt more equipped to face these challenges, knowing that Matthew was now a part of his life. That night, Ray sat at his desk and began to write in a journal he had started since learning about Matthew. He wrote about his feelings, the meeting, and his hopes for the future. This journal, he decided, would one day be something he could share with Matthew, a testament to his journey and the love he had for his son from the moment he knew he existed. As Ray wrote the last words of the day's entry, he felt a sense of peace. There was a long road ahead, but he was finally moving forward, step by step, towards a future where he could be the father Matthew deserved. Hey listeners, if you enjoyed this video and want to stay up to date with our latest content, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. You definitely won't want to miss what's coming up next. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video with sweet cheating stories.